Hey neighbors, Kevin here with etrailer, and today we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Curt custom fifth wheel installation kit here on our 2017 Toyota Tundra. Now Tundras typically aren't going to be our recommended choice when it comes to towing a fifth wheel trailer, just because their capacities typically are a bit lacking compared to some other options out on the market. But that being said, you still can do it as long as you're making sure that your trailer is within that capacity of your truck. And if that is the case, then typically you're probably going to have a short bed, so you're going to want to switch over to some base rails, so that way you can use a rotating pin box to gain a little bit of extra turning clearance so that the nose of your trailer doesn't end up contacting the cab of the truck. Now with this base rail kit, there are going to be some fitment issues depending on model to model. One of the biggest ones is with it being a crew max. If you do have that, you would not be able to install that because this is going to change where everything is located on the frame, and then your brackets aren't going to line up properly with the bed. So you would not be able to use this if you had a crew max. Now there were some other issues that Curt lines out in the instructions themselves. One of them being a control box, which was located right around this area on our driver's side, and we ended up not even having to move that. They give you a relocation bracket for that if that is an issue for you, but in our case, it honestly was not in the way at all. We didn't have to do anything with it. I took it off initially because I was just following the instructions, but we ended up just putting it back exactly how it was. Now there were some other fitment issues just because with the way things lined up under the bed, we had hat channels in the way, we had a cross member in the way. If you look right here, we did have to swap out our hardware. This is all grade 8 hardware that we have here, and typically you're going to have carriage bolts that are running from the base rails down into those frame brackets, but instead we had to switch over to some hex bolts, same grade and everything like that. We just wanted to switch to something to where we could get a wrench on it, because down below this there's a cross member that completely blocks any kind of wrench from getting into there. We weren't even able to use a crow's foot on it, so if you do end up having to do that, make sure that you're getting the correct 1/2 inch by 13 thread, grade 8 bolts. That way you know that it's nice and safe. It's going to be able to stand up to that weight of that trailer hitch pulling on it. Along with that, just going over some of the specs on this, this is going to be a carbide finish, both on the rails and then down on the brackets. You're going to have that powder coated finish. So that way you don't have to worry about these rusting out and looking like crap in your bed. But that being said, it doesn't hurt to throw a tonneau cover on and make sure that these aren't getting rained on. Over time, exposure is eventually going to wear into these, but these are made to last for quite a while. Another thing that people typically are going to have an issue with is with these base rails being in here, now we're losing some of our bed space, and it's not something that we can easily just take out. From the bottom of our bed up, we're looking at right around an inch and a quarter here in height. Typically with these base rails, a lot of them are getting pretty slim compared to how it used to be in the past, where you'd see like 2.5 inches in height here, which adds up to a lot, which can throw off your hitch height depending on which hitch you have. So this being down a little bit more compact is pretty nice. Along with that, these are going to be ISR, so that's why there's these extra slots here. So if you ever wanted to swap out your fifth wheel hitch, maybe you wanted to upgrade to something a little bit heavier, not in this case since it's a Tundra, but if that was the case with a different truck, these base rails would be able to handle that because they have an ISR footprint here. So that's going to be the 22 inches from the center of one rail back to the other, and then the separation here between the different hitches is just that spacing for the width itself. Now with all that being said, we can talk about the installation here. I did say that we had a lot of difficulties with a few different things, and Curt even mentioned some of those. This is one where I probably wouldn't do it myself if I did not have all of the specialty tools that we used here today. So we ended up using a crow's foot. There's a couple of variations of that we've used just because we needed a further out extension from that so that we can actually get into the tight spaces to get all of these bolts torqued down. The frame brackets themselves weren't too bad. Getting that into place really isn't that hard. You do have to loosen up your hitch, and you can pivot it back and have the brackets kind of slide up so that way you can get the frame brackets into place. So those ones, not too challenging, exactly what I'd expect from a base rail install, but just with how tight the clearances were for these carriage bolts up for the base rails into the frame brackets, it's something that I probably wouldn't recommend doing at home. I definitely recommend using our dealer locator, entering in your zip code, and finding a shop to get it professionally installed to save yourself all of the hassle. Now, if you are the installer that's going to have to do this, please stick around and you can see how we did it so you can get some tips and tricks on how to get it done yourself. So starting off our install, first step is going to be removing our spare tire so that way we have some room to work. Once you have that done, we're going to be taking our side plate for the front on the passenger side. So it's going to be this guy right here where it's nice and long up front. It's just got that square piece up top with the rectangle portion more than the slotted portion facing towards the front of the vehicle. And what they want you to do is hold this up, and we're going to find the hole, which is this guy right here, and we're going to enlarge that. Now, when I went to pull this up, it's not really sitting how I would like it to, so we're going to skip some of these instructions and just double check that we are getting this exactly how we want it to by drilling our holes up in the bed with the base rails first. So as you can see, like for me to get this lined up with this other hole where it's supposed to be, it really isn't giving us a straight shot at that bolt hole. So it might be that the hat channel is in our way and we might have to cut a little section of that out just to make that work. This could just be a year model issue instead of a overall issue. So we're gonna start by going up and drilling down those 4 holes for our base rail. That way we can line it up and make sure that this is actually where we want it to sit. So like I said, we are gonna skip over the frame rail brackets and start drilling our holes for the base rails so that way we can line up with the holes down there. So we're making sure we're putting our frame bracket in the right spot, especially since we're gonna be drilling through the frame. So for this part, we're going to start with the cab side, which is a little unusual. Typically, we're going for the tailgate side first, but the instructions are going to call for 49 3/8 spacing from the end of our bed here. But since we have a spray-in liner, that's going to add about a 1/16 of an inch onto our length here that we're going over because this goes over the lip of the bed. So I'm going to add a 1/16 on. So we're right at 49 7/16, and I've not only measured from this side, I come back over, measure from this side, make sure that you have this perfectly even both ways, and then I've also gone ahead and I'm going to check my, from the wheel well over to it, and looking at this right now, looks like we're right at 3.5. A little bit off here, but it's kind of hard to tell with your wheel well. There we go. You got to make sure you're hitting it at the same exact spot because it curves up. So I'm getting 3.5 right there as well. So we know we're good front to back and side to side. We got this perfectly lined up. So our next step is going to be taking a center punch, and we're going to do the outer 4 holes with our center punch, and then we'll just drill a little 1/8 inch pilot hole down so that way we can see where we need to be. Now that we have this set in place, we can use our center punch, and for the cab side here, we're going to be using the second slot in, so we'll want that for both sides. So we can get that centered, run our punch. Since it's so hard to see my center punch hole when I move this out of the way, instead I'm going to be paint markering it first. That way we can actually see what we're doing. We'll get our base rail out of the way. We've got our spots here. I'm going to hit those one more time with my center punch. It's because this is a really textured pattern. And then we'll take our 1/8 inch drill bit and we will do a little pilot hole here. All right, so we're back under, looking on our passenger side frame rail, trying to line up our bracket. It lines up pretty well with the front hole, but this hole closer to our tailgate is a little bit blocked just because we have the hat channel in the way. So what I'm going to do is just notch out just a small section here so that our bracket can sit over it, because we're going to have a spacer that's under it plus one on top of it between that and the bed. There we go. That looks looks a lot better. All right, now that we've drilled out those holes to show where our base rail is going to come through, this is lining up with the head channel edge just kind of trimmed out. So we can get to actually drilling through the frame rail now and run our bolt through our frame rail mounting brackets so that we can move on to getting these base rails attached. Now that we've confirmed this is the correct hole and it's exactly how we need it, I'm going to step this up to a 5/8 hole. So right now I've got a 7/16, so I'm just going to work my way up to it. That way we're not really having to sit here and drill forever. Now we have that hole enlarged over on our passenger side. The next step is going to be removing this control box right here, and to do so, on the back side there's going to be a nut, and that's going to require a 12mm socket. So we'll pop that off, and we're going to be reinstalling this again, but just with a bracket that's included with the kit, just to get it spaced further away. And now we can slide this out. It's a little rusty, so not really wanting to come out of the bracket here. There we go. Now that we got access to that back one, I'm going to get that one off as well, and then we'll pull this whole bracket off, because it's going to be this black bracket on the back is going to be separate from these two guys. And then once we have our frame bracket up on here, the new bracket that we have, which is this guy right here, this little Z-shaped bracket, is going to mount up with the hardware that clamps the bracket to the frame rail. All right, so they had us remove that electrical connector and then put the bracket in. Bracket's nowhere near it. There's no way for me to get that electrical control box over to where they're saying to mount it with this bracket, but it's honestly right out of our way, so I think I'm just going to reinstall it back with those factory nuts, and then we'll just skip this part for now. If we do run into an issue later on, we'll probably have to just fabricate something to make it work. I'm seeing a lot of inconsistencies with the instructions versus what we're actually seeing with the vehicles. So this might actually just be a trim package issue, but if you're going to put it for, you know, each model, it should really match up, and in this case I'm just not really seeing that too well. So we're going to keep chugging along though. I marked out my hole because this bracket is going to line up with the hole inside there, and I was just under the truck and I could see that my holes were matching up from the bed. So I just marked this out. We'll center punch that and then drill that out, because it's also going to need to allow for a 5/8 bolt to go through. So I've hit it with the center punch. Now I'm going with my 1/8 inch drill bit, and I'm just going to work my way up all the way to 5/8. So we just drilled that hole down on the frame rail on our driver's side. Now they want you to come back up into the bed, and we're going to enlarge our holes that we have. So the two on this side and the two on the passenger side as well for our base rails, and we wanted to get that up to 9/16. So I'm going to be going, skipping around through the bits just till I get up to that 9/16 just to make it easier. So each way we're just only chipping out just a little bit each time. So once you have that cut out, you'll want to come back and just file and keep vacuuming, kind of make sure you got this all nice and cleaned up, no burrs that'll potentially hang up on your hardware. So I think we're good on this side. And then once you are ready, we're going to put some clear coat on here. That's going to help protect that bare metal from us drilling. So now we're going to drop in our carriage bolts along with our U-shaped spacers. We're going to slide that right into place, and we'll use our carriage bolts to make sure that we are installing our frame brackets right where they need to be. All right, with that in place, now we can go back down under the vehicle. All right, I'm on the driver's side right now. If you don't really have enough room, you might need to pull those carriage bolts just back up before you get the plate in, but we're going to try and get it with it down already. When you hold it like this, and we're going to slot it in and then turn it to get this in place, because there's a lot of other stuff in the way here. Yeah, so I'm hitting that carriage bolt. I might need to just pop it up just a bit. go. Get some wiring here we'll work around. All right, now we're going to be using our larger hex bolts. We're going to throw a flat washer on it, and we're going to slot that through, get that lined up with the side. That way it'll help hold it in place, so that way when we go under fully and put on the nuts and plates that go on the vertical bolts, we won't have any issues. Same thing with this. A second one of these with a flat washer. On the other side, we're going to be using these offset spacers. So it's these guys right here with the square bit a little bit further out. It's not just centered on there. These will slot right on there, and then we'll have larger flange nuts that'll go on those bolts. And that's going to be on the inside of our frame rail because our frame rail is a C-channel. So I'm going to wait and we'll lift it back up. We'll get under there so we can see everything and get everything tightened down. Now for our side bolts, the horizontal ones going through the frame rail, we're going to be throwing on these offset spacers. That one in, that one in. And these are going to clamp onto it as we tighten it down with those flange nuts. Which we want the larger ones. I get that started, and then I'm going to tighten and torque this down to the specifications listed in the instructions manual. It's going to be just a little bit too hard to see just because I'm going to have to be right in the way of the camera here just once we get to that point. And since these aren't carriage bolts on the side, you will have to have a wrench holding the head of it. Otherwise, it's going to keep spinning like it's doing to me right now. All right, so now we're going to do the same process over on the passenger side as well with our front bracket on the cab side here. And it's going to be just those offset spacers again. Along with a flange nut. Now this top one up here is going to be a nightmare. There's not really any room to get in there. And we've got a bunch of other stuff in the way. I might need to trim out this rail just slightly just to get this on. But this is the factory hole, I do believe, so it's not like it was something that we chose. There we go. We lucked out. It does actually work. But getting a socket on here probably not going to be the same. All right, we lucked out. We don't have to actually do anything special. We used a chrome socket, and we just barely fit in place there. So I'm going to get my torque wrench set up, and we will get these torqued down. We tried. I mean, it was super tough to try and get it from the inside, so I did end up having to come towards the outside. We had a wrench with a 15/16 socket on the nut, and then we torqued it from the bolt head side, just because it was just impossible trying to get our torque wrench in there. So you might have to do the same at home, depending on how much space you got there. So we did have to make some changes on the bolts on the tailgate side. So I've already got this one dropped in. We're going to be doing the same thing over on the other side as well, on the passengers. So the carriage bolts that they give you, unfortunately, come out in a spot where there's no way to get a wrench onto the nut at all, just because it's so tight in the frame with the hat channel right there. So there's no way to torque it down from the nut side, and with it being a carriage bolt, there's no way to get it from the top. So we switched over to some hex head bolts. These are 2 inches, half inch by, or grade 8, sorry. And we are dropping those in, and we're going to use that flange bolt because I can get a pair of pliers on it, and then since it is a flange bolt with some teeth on it, it is going to start to bite into that spacer that we have down on the bottom, and we'll be able to torque it from the top. Now that's typically not what we want to do, but in this case this is going to be the only way to safely torque these down. So you may find that if you have that same issue, if you get down there and find that you just can't get your hands or any kind of tool on that nut just because of the spacing there, then switch over. Make sure you go to your hardware store. You want to get grade 8 bolts, and like I said, half inch by 2 inches. All right, now we've struggled through. I've had a couple of assistants help me because we needed a second person up in the bed to work on the bolt because we had just enough room to get the nut up in place and then have the bolt start to go down into it, and it needed to thread all the way in. Otherwise, it's not going to fit if you just hammer the bolt in and then try to get the nut on. So definitely a huge challenge, but now that we have it and the teeth on our flange nut are biting, I'm going to torque this down to the specs that are listed in the last step of the instruction manual. Now that we have the front two, or the tailgate side, torqued down, I'm going to get back under the vehicle and then we will do the cab side here. And then once those are in place, we can switch to our back brackets. So it was really tight on the backside here. We ended up using an 18-inch extension with a 3/4-inch deep well socket so that we could get onto both bolts here. But we've got them both torqued, so now we can move on to those rear brackets. For our rear bracket, we are going to have to remove the bolts holding in our hitch. Now this might not be for every single model. They do make a note of that. Unfortunately on ours, we are going to have to pop out this bolt, these 3 bolts here, and we are going to pivot the hitch on this back bolt. So I would loosen that up just a bit too, so you get a little bit of wiggle room. That way it's not pinched up against the frame here. But we're going to pop those 5 bolts out, and we'll do the same thing over on the driver's side. Now if you have anything that's going to be super tight, I would probably loosen that up. So like they had airlines ran right here, but it was real tight, so I didn't want to risk that kind of pulling on that. So I did cut the zip ties off, and I'll replace those later. But it looks like we're pretty much good on the wiring and stuff. There's enough slack in that. I could probably be fine just with the pivot motion that we're going to do. So I'm going to get these taken off, and we'll get to the next part here. Now I'm going to have my lovely assistant Sam push up on the bumper and hitch here, and that's going to drop down that bracket over there so that we can slide this into place. Definitely going to take a little bit of maneuvering to really get it how you need. There we go. And it's kind of pinched on that. While that's up, I'm going to get the other side, and we're just going to do the same exact thing. Now with that back in place, we can lift this back up, and we're going to use that factory hardware because we got weld nuts on the inside of the frame. So once we push this back up, it'll sandwich in between the hitch and the frame rails. Now you might have to use a pry bar. I just stuck the pry bar inside because we have a rounded one, this guy right here. And what I did was tried to move it around, kind of just jingle it back and forth so that way we can get that hole perfectly lined up. I would probably start with your front ones here when you're putting on the trailer hitch, and then go to those 3 rear ones later. That way you know you got this all set before you go and try and tighten that up. Now we have our frame brackets in place. We need to figure out how to, or what spot to drill through on the base rail so that we can get that mounted up to our brackets. And the easiest way to do that is drop in your 5th wheel hitch. If you already have it there, that's going to give you that perfect measurement because we are going to match right up with our feet. If you take a tape measure, you should be getting 22 inches from the center of the tailgate rail to the center of our cab rail. And then we'll want to just double check. Now it should be pretty good just because we have the hitch in place, but it never hurts to double check just the side to side. So it looks like we're right at 3 9/16. Here I'm about 3 3/8. So I do need to kind of tap this over just a bit and get this lined up properly. 22. All right. Now that that's all good, we are going to be switching to a different hole this time. So instead of the second hole in, we're going to be going to the 3rd hole in. I'm going to mark that just because I'll have to get this out of the way so I can drill. And then we're going to work our way up. I'm going to start out with an 1/8 inch drill bit. Then we'll go down below, just double check, make sure that we're lining up with our frame bracket. And then we can start going a little bit bigger, working our way up to 9/16. So now we're going to be doing the same process. We're going to have our U-shaped spacer and then our carriage bolts. Now our U-spacers will go under the bed between our bracket and the bed, so the rib portion of our bed right here, and that's going to prevent any crushing. Our square spacer is going to go underneath the bracket, and that's going to be followed up by our flange nut. Wouldn't hurt to have an extra hand up top, just pressing down on that carriage bolt, because each time I try to do it, it's fighting me. But you can also try pulling on the spacer. So my camera guy, Tom, here is a genius, and I thought of that as well. Help pull it back, just get it started. And then we'll move on to our next one. So on the passenger side, there will be a wire harness in the way. If you pry up on the push pins that are holding it in, you can get yourself a little bit more space to work with. All right, so I'm snugking these up right now and just trying to kind of get an idea of how we're going to approach torquing these down. Furthest one out to the tailgate here has a bunch of stuff in the way. That's probably going to end up having to be a crow's foot, and we'll come in from here and crank away at it because I can't get a socket on it just because this cross member here is blocking us. Now on the other side, I do have a tiny bit more room. Maybe I can switch over to a short well and sneak it in, but we'll have to try that out. The back side of it, closer to the cab, those ones are perfect. I could easily get right into them and tighten them down. All right, so I was able to get a crow's foot on both front ones here by the tailgate side, but because it's a crow's foot, we are only getting a small turn each time. So torquing this down can take quite a bit. So we have to keep resetting every single turn here. All right, now that we have everything torqued down, I just need to reconnect my harness. I popped it off in a couple places, like I was saying, those push pins, so I pushed that back in. There's one more up top here. We can get back in place, if I can find it now. There it is. I'll push that back down into this cross member. In. And then like I was saying earlier in the video with this wire or this control box here, we honestly didn't even need to take it off. So this might just be a trim specific issue where this is in the way, because the way they're showing it, it was sitting way further back here in the way of our cab side brackets, but fortunately for us, it was not in our way. So I'm just going to reinstall those nuts, have that mounted back up, and then we'll be good to go. With everything torqued down, the last thing to do is just drop in your fifth wheel hitch. Make sure that you put in your pin and clip, and then you're all ready to go, and the install is complete. Well, I think that does it for today's look at and installation of the Curt Custom Fifth Wheel Installation Kit here on our 2017 Toyota Tundra. My name's Kevin, and if you still have questions about what's going to be the right fifth wheel installation kit for your Toyota Tundra, please feel free to reach out to us via our Ask the Experts link, a comment on this video, or a phone call to our customer service department, and we'd be happy to help you out on your journey.